grind, there's that thing that, everyone talks about called the dip, right? Where it
Yeah.
feels really easy at first and then it gets extremely hard and then it gets better. I mean, a lot of founders that maybe don't like get to the place that they want with their business, like are really tempted to give up in that dip. And it makes sense.
Valley of
Like
despair.
yeah. And like, that's real, bro.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Built Online podcast, where we talk about all things online business, from e-commerce to digital marketing to building your dream life and your dream business. I'm your host, Cody McGuffie, and if you've been with us for a while, you might remember us as the Etsy Seller Podcast. Well, we're expanding our horizons and transitioning from just talking about Etsy businesses to covering all types of online businesses, because we believe the opportunity is so massive that we should be covering so many unique businesses online. And at EverBee, we believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to pursue their passions, live life on their own terms. And we believe in making e-commerce accessible to everyone in the world, no matter where they are, and be using it to make a positive impact in our families and in our communities. We believe that anyone who truly commits to something, truly pursues it with undeniable force of will, that they will succeed. Let's jump into today's show.
What's up, man? Welcome.
What's up, dude? Thank you so much for having me on the pod, man.
You look great, man. You look great, sound great. I'm excited to dive in today.
Thank you. Been going to the gym every once in a while, so that works out.
That's good. I know we'll talk about mental fitness, health fitness, all that stuff too as we dive in. But I'm excited to dive in today. I asked you, I think months and months ago, how did we get here? I asked you months and months ago to come on the podcast, and I really was selfish in that ask, meaning I wanted to learn more about, one, you personally, and then two, the businesses that you've built over the years. And not just like small businesses, although those are very interesting too, but also the big businesses that you've literally built from the ground up, sold even, and capitalized and provided a lot of value to the world, and also about the businesses that you're building now. So does that sound good?
Dude, that sounds great. I think entrepreneurship is a journey. And when it's built online, it usually takes you through all these different ups and downs, twists and turns. And so I've been through a few, which I'd love to chat about.
Cool. So let's dive into the beginning, if you don't mind. Who's Grant? How do we get here? Maybe anything that you can share about your backstory, and that way everybody can kind of get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, would love to. So, I describe myself as a multi-time entrepreneur. So, headline, I've started 8 companies and I've sold 4 of those successfully. And I'm really working on one right now, which I think will be the biggest one yet. And so size isn't always the thing that I focus on when it comes down to entrepreneurship. What I think is more interesting is impact. And so as an entrepreneur, I think that like a lot of people who are potentially listening right now, there's so many points to be starting on your journey, right? You might be like starting your first company, you might be thinking about it or having a full-time job, or you might be like deep in the swing of things, or you might be on like your 7th business. So there's this range of entrepreneurship that like I've been through. And when it comes down to like, speaking to potentially someone and making an impact on this podcast, I'll tell my story through a little bit of a lens of where I got started. So, I grew up in Colorado, and I never really felt totally at home in Colorado. And I think what was missing for me was like a real culture of entrepreneurship. And so when I was like 18, I took a trip out to San Diego, and I actually took a trip to California and just explored the coast a little bit. And I felt at home once I had gotten to the West Coast because of the business ideology and the sort of pro entrepreneurship culture that does exist here on the West Coast. So I remember like yesterday, I like drove into this specific area in Newport Beach, and I was like, oh man, like I am home. Everyone around me was a business
Things are
owner.
happening. Yeah.
Things are happening. I mean, there was McLarens driving by me. Like there was a lot of like wealth in the area, which like I was just inherently attracted to. And I remember this lesson, I think that, when I was young, I deployed in terms of just action in my life, which was, we all have heard that saying that you're like, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you who you are. We are like the people we spend time with, especially more so when we're young. And there's a larger version of that, which is like, show me the environment you're in, and I'll show you who you are. And so I wanted to be in an environment that was like pro entrepreneurship, pro wealth creation, and all that stuff. So moved to California, and I had a job at the time. Before I had moved, I was working at Apple, and I had gotten into the retail side of the business as they were launching retail stores. They did this really cool 3-day offsite training for the new retail staff called Apple Core, and they taught sales training and did so much really cool stuff. And I wanted to teach that. It was a hard job to get, but I ended up getting that. And my mentors were like, "Oh my gosh, you got to stay at Apple. You're going to be an executive here. It's going to be great." And I was like, okay, actually, I thank you for saying that. And I'm also like quitting and dropping out of school and moving to California to start a business. And so, my parents had to wrestle with that, and I had to wrestle with that too. But I ended up moving out to California and starting my first company. And so I taught myself how to code, and I had created this company called Just News, which was, I think when you're a first time entrepreneur, you're just looking at like, how can I get a shot on goal? And oftentimes, if there's a large capital requirement, that can feel so much more daunting, because there's so many layers to that, right? Like, how do I raise capital? Plus, how do I build a business? Plus, how do I market the thing? And so I just wanted to start with one. And so I ended up building this tool to help people produce content on the web without having to know how to code. And I think it was a lot of universal luck. I ended up getting an acquisition offer for that business within like
Wow.
6 months,
What year was this and how old were
and I
you?
sold it. It wasn't. Oh man, I was like 20 or
Wow.
21 years old at the most. And I was actually like, I didn't even, this guy pulled a fast one on me, which is just a funny aside story, which is the original email for acquisition interest in that company came from this email that was like John Top Hat, at yahoo.com. It was like a total like
Mhm.
junk spoof email. And they were like, "Hey, we'd be interested in buying your company, blah blah blah." So I was like, "Okay,
Mhm.
well, let's talk." So I sent a number that I thought like Joe Schmo would be okay with, and then he comes back, and it's through this professional email, and he's a super large
Wow.
conglomerate. He's like the M&A head of this large conglomerate. So so anyways, a little bit of a lesson learned there. So now I have a side domain that I use to negotiate like domains. So it's a fake email that I use to negotiate domains so they don't see me on Google or
Interesting.
whatever. But anyways, yeah. So I mean,
Did you
going
actually
back to
sell
the
that
story
company?
though and speeding it
Did
up
you
a bit,
actually sell that company?
I
Are you
yeah,
able to
yeah,
share, is any of
yeah,
that
I did, yeah.
public, that how much was it and all that stuff? Anything that you're willing to share?
I mean, I don't share the specific numbers. However, like I could say like it was life changing for a 21-year-old to a certain degree, but it like was not life changing money. I was just broke. so
Understood.
so like
So what,
I
and
made my
just
first few
for
bucks.
context for the folks, for people listening to this probably doesn't like set Grant up forever life. It's more just like it's a significant amount of capital for your next thing, probably, right? And we're talking less than 1 million, but like solid
Oh
21-year-old
yeah.
money. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it was like less than 100 grand. Like it was a small
okay,
thing. I probably could have been better off by just like building the company myself and not selling it. But it
maybe, but
was
now
just
you get to
like
like you have this big win under your belt now. You have a win. You're just like, wow, I know how to do this. And it could have been $2 and you sold the company though. And that's important at that young age.
I actually think that is true, and I think that also like when you're young and you're looking for, I think a big thing about being young is that you really seek to prove things to yourself as much as everyone else, right? Like you really want to prove it to yourself. Like, do I have what it takes to sell a business? And so when they had come along and offered me, it could have been any amount of money, and I probably would have accepted because of the storyline that it would have created in my head.
Right.
And I think that like those storylines, that narrative, that internal narrative that we tell ourselves is so essential for building a company. And especially like when you're in the grind, there's that thing that everyone talks about called the dip, right? Where it
Yeah.
feels really easy at first, and then it gets extremely hard, and then it gets better. I mean, a lot of founders that maybe don't like get to the place that they want with their business like are really tempted to give up in that dip, and it makes sense.
Valley of
Like
despair.
like there's yeah, and like that's real, bro. Like if anything,
Very
like
real.
yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, like long story short, had that, and then I just got like addicted to just building and selling companies, and so I got really attracted to the online space. So, long story short, I just got addicted to building and selling companies. And so I got really interested in the physical goods space. And so, there weren't a whole lot of tools to find out like what was selling online successfully at the time. And so, looking around, asking friends, I finally came up with the idea to enter like drinkware, which was a really interesting space for, a young, like 22-year-old to enter, but ended up loving it. And we created this company called Balls of Steel, of all things. And it was stainless steel whiskey chillers. That's how it started,
I've
and
seen
we
those
would give
before.
50. Yeah, here's how you saw it, because there's no way when we first started the company that it would have gotten any screen time on anyone's device. Um, it was a stainless steel whiskey chiller, and you could put it in your beverage and it would chill. Its competitive alternative was ice, basically. And we gave 15% to men's testicular cancer, and we just wanted to like tie this cause back to the name of the product. And we were
Cool.
selling to guys, and there's this really key lesson that I learned right here. So I ended up spending like altogether about 4 years working on that company. And the first year and a half, like it didn't go anywhere. Like we had an incredibly hard time selling to guys, but I just stuck with it and was like testing different funnels and really refining, the digital funnels that we had created for the product. But it just wasn't really going anywhere. Then I got this email, and this is like where execution like really does create luck. It expands the platform for luck. The email came in from this woman named Bobby Ray. She's like, "Hey, would you overnight a set of your Balls of Seal? We want to do a TV segment." And I was like, "That sounds cool." We just had the discipline to do it. So I overnight the sets. And then 2 days later, I had pretty much already forgotten about it. And my phone is like blowing up with orders, like, vroom, vroom, vroom. And it's like,
Mm,
by like 6 a.m., we had done like 50,000. And it was my first like big sales hit as an entrepreneur.
mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like let me go look at the orders and see who's here. So I'm scrolling through the names, and there's not a single guy name in the list of orders. It's all
Wow.
females. And I was like, oh man, our problem is that we're trying to sell this product to the wrong audience. And by switching the audience, like we can totally succeed here, because women were buying it as gifts for their men.
Of
So
course
I
you would.
called the
Yeah.
company, because I was just at my house, and I called the office and I was like, okay, change the entire funnel. We are now a women's gift company, same product, different audience. And the thing goes on to do 7 figures in sales for a couple years in a row. And then I ended up selling it on the private markets. And that one was actually like fairly life-changing money, of all things. And so I really loved that company because of the lessons it taught me. Like I wanted to give up when we were having a hard time selling to guys, but we just didn't, and we ended up finding success, right? So like staying power is
Mm.
everything when it comes to entrepreneurship. And
I
then
love
also
that.
like
Staying
we all
power, key.
staying power. And it's honestly like you never know when, if you're executing over time, you are like, you may not see it like in you may not see the results of it immediately, but if you're doing things even like mildly well, you're boosting your skill set, you're increasing that platform for luck to land on, and you just never know where it's going to come from. So I always, I would encourage anyone listening right now, like if it feels hard or you feel like it's not working, like stick with it. You'll find your breakthrough and you'll find your outcome. And sometimes pivots are a thing too. You kind of got to know when to hold them and fold them, which
No,
is
this
something
that's
we
the
can talk
challenging
about if you
part.
want. But
I would, but I actually want to stay on the staying power too, because a lot of people listening to this right now, this may be their first or second or third go at entrepreneurship. It's definitely not their
mm,
fifth and sixth and seventh typically. And so staying power is actually a fairly new concept, right? Because if something doesn't work like in a week, people tend to be like, I think I'm doing everything wrong, but the reality
yeah.
is there's a lot of value in focus and concentration. And what I want to pull out from your story of what was the company called? Balls of Steel?
Yeah, it was called Balls of
It's
Steel. It was
such
actually
a
called
cool.
Boss eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so and then eventually, okay, so you have this product, you have this market that you're serving. I mean, you stayed with that for a year and a half before you had this luck. And when you say luck, obviously you created that luck, but and then you just made a slight pivot. You didn't pivot the entire company, but you pivoted more of like messaging, the audience of who you're targeting. But you didn't necessarily just abandon the product, even because you obviously knew that the product was had some sort of demand. It was going to have some sort of demand there, maybe.
Yeah, and like, oh man, I mean, we would have hints of demand. Like,
Okay.
we were probably doing like a few grand a month here or there, but some weeks we would do like no sales. Like really was pretty like it was a dismal outlook for like a year and a half.
Mm,
But I just stuck with it, and I think intrinsically, like, there's probably part of that staying power is partially just like knowing that you'll find a breakthrough. And the question I ask myself oftentimes when it comes to staying power, because there's other brands that like I've navigated away from because of like, just a failure to find success. And the question I often ask myself is like, okay, have we tried everything? And what's the speed of our tests? And so if we're trying one thing a year, like that's a lot different than like, are we trying three things a week potentially, or at least like,
mhm.
are we trying two or three things, every month?
But to
And
be
so for
clear,
us,
you're not talking about 3 different businesses. You're talking about experiment on the same business, 3 different trying new things, same business, though. It's not like you're abandoning your current business and then trying a new business.
yeah, sticking with it, staying power. It's just the speed of how fast we're trying different ways to articulate the product, how to, different channels to market it, different methodologies of marketing it. And like the thing I learned, so like coming forward a step on the journey, like after I like that company sold, and I did have this moment in time where I was not full time working on that, and I had started a couple other companies. And so I'm just going to move through them
Okay,
quickly. But I ended up starting like a brick and mortar salon, which became like Orange County's #1 salon, and then ended up launching an eyelash extension serum in the beauty space. And then I navigated into clothing, and so the big outcome that I'm fairly well known for at this point is the clothing outcome. That company is called BYLT Basics, and we could jump into that story in a second. But
perfect.
across all of these different industries, a lot of people would be like, you don't have any experience in drinkware, and then you don't have any experience in building a salon, and then you don't have any experience in clothing. And I think through all of these different companies, the thing that like I would encourage anyone to lean on is that like business is actually fairly simple. It really boils down to me to like three fundamental big steps, which is like number one, you know, can you build a competitive alternative in the marketplace that is 3 to 10 times better than anything else? And like, if you could do that, if you could build a 3x to 10x better product, then I think you're off to the races. And the next question is, can you articulate it in a way that magnetically pulls interest into that product? And then finally, like, show everyone. And oftentimes, like when I'm doing, when I'm mentoring for founders or just helping friends out, it's that middle piece that's so difficult. So I think a lot of people have a 3x better product, and a lot of people know how to turn ads on and what channels to go to. It's how to articulate the product so that it is magnetic to people. And that's a skill set I really honed in on through these different companies. And so when it came time to like build in the clothing space, which was a desire of mine to kind of get into a larger niche and go make a real world impact through physical goods, I settled on clothing because it was kind of broken. Like in 2016, when I would buy a t-shirt, I had to spend like $90 on it. Otherwise, it would turn into garbage when I put it through the wash. And I just felt
Mm,
like that was not right. And with my experience in China and my co-founder's experience like manufacturing in China, we kind of put our heads together and we're like, all right, let's reinvent men's basics. Because right now it just means white shirts and
mhm,
socks, and like it's almost like a dirty word. Like no one wants to touch basics. And so we were like, let's call it
mm,
premium basics, build that category, and just launch. We're going to start with underwear, which actually did not work. So like our cost per sale
mm.
for boxers when we launched Built, which is spelled like BYLT, it ended up costing like $5,000 like per order for boxers. And so we realized really quickly like it was going to cost too much to get a guy like off the couch on Instagram and buying boxers, because that's not like a normal pattern for guys. But other types of clothing they're super interested in. So
Mm,
that's like a moment where we quickly did pivot to build like different SKUs. And in our case, it was like shirts with like a kind of bottom hem that was curved, and we called it the drop cut. No one really knew where to get it. And it really wasn't sold by any other brands. And so we kind
Yeah,
of pioneered that silhouette.
quick note there too for anybody listening that hasn't heard of BYLT Basics. Grant, you guys, BYLT Basics is an amazing company, and I'm not necessarily. I know we're fast forwarding a little bit, but you sold that company, and you're not necessarily a part
Yeah.
of that company anymore. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about the product, talking about the messaging. Um, for example, like I personally am a BYLT Basics customer. I have been for years now, and I don't buy it because I'm great friends with Grant. I buy it. It's a nice bonus, but I buy it because it's nice, solid, premium feeling drop cut shirt. And I primarily bought it for the drop cut first. I was attracted to that first, the hem that you're talking about for anybody that's never heard that before. Uh, but then also it just feels like good quality. And so if you haven't heard of BYLT Basics, go and look it up just to see what Grant and his co-founder has built, over the years, and check out how they message it. Check out how they positioned these products, and it's pretty fascinating to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, and from the beginning of the company, I can give a bit of insight into clothing for, I'm sure there's someone listening who's considering clothing or already
A
in
lot
it.
of them. A lot of so to
Yeah.
give you context, we have hundreds of thousands of people that sell online that come to EverBee, use EverBee, and a lot of them actually do sell apparel, and clothing is being a major one of them. Now they do print on demand style, which you're familiar with print on demand, but there's
Yeah,
definitely
very.
people that have inventory, hold inventory, they print their own shirts, they're doing that as well. So uh, you could talk to these people.
Oh man, I love it. Like, here's like the quick I'll rattle off where we got to, right? So,
Okay.
or where at least the brand got to. So, today the brand does well over 9 figures. It's recently represented by some top tier celebrities like Mike Tyson and most NFL players and tons of influencers online. So that's where it is today. But where do we start? It started with nothing. I started with an idea on a Duffy boat to change clothing. Like that's where it started. And so for anyone listening, like great things come from the work that you do today, and you just kind of got to believe it. So when it comes down to clothing, I think the unique insight, not on the product quality level, that's like super important. If product quality is there, product quality wins over time. But you need like a way to present clothing that's in a really compelling way so that you can create transactions online. And the thing that I got really obsessed over was this idea of putting on a garment is like a moment in someone's life where there's a chance to put on more than just clothing. Like you can put on an ideology, or you could put on a belief or an idea. And I had originally was going to go in a different direction with BYLT, and um, it was going to be rooted in how do you put on ideology. So I kind of went deep there and thought of a whole bunch of ideas. And when BYLT kind of formulated and came to head, it was the ideology that I felt, I wanted to sell, and two, I thought people would be interested in, is the concept of confidence. It's like if I had to bottle up that feeling of when you're crushing it in a meeting, or the day is just going your way, when you're putting up your PR at the gym, like whatever it is, that kind of peak feeling. If I had to condense that feeling of confidence down to a brand name, it would be BYLT, and that's where the name came from. And I think that actually, like, the thing that like made BYLT not only like stand out in the marketplace, but also like be able to compete, was that is the real focus. It's like clothing is a tertiary benefit of buying confidence. And with clothing in particular, I think you can expand that exact recipe that I just said about selling an ideology out to many different verticals. And we see it
Mm.
today winning. So like I there's a bunch of examples. Obviously, there's like the large clothing companies, but all the way down to like, sometimes it helps to kind of focus on what's right ahead of you as a founder. And so like there's a company that does like mental health clothing. So it's like an
Mm.
ideology of mental health, and positive messaging. And they do 24-hour window drops, and they'll do like $300,000 to $500,000 per day when they drop. And so it's like there's so many ways to bring an ideology through clothing. But I think that's the thing that I
That's
just really
interesting.
don't hear people talking about, which is
No, they
like this
don't, Grant.
opportunity to put on more.
I think people don't talk about it because it seems like everyone the messaging around apparel or clothing is that it's oversaturated, like there's no differentiation. You can't win. Everything's already been done in apparel. Everything's already been done in shirts. Like I would have also agreed to that because I don't think that way. Historically, I haven't thought that way. But you guys are talking
Mm.
about reinventing the shirt, and somebody would say, "What do you mean reinvent the shirt? Like the shirt's fine, you know?" But you're not talking
Yeah.
about only the material. You're talking about the feeling of when you put the shirt on, of what it represents, for you. For me, as put it on in front of the mirror and so like this thing fits nicely, and
Yes. Yeah.
that's a different type of reinvention. And yeah.
Yeah, and like, I a big shout out to one of my buddies now, Jock Spitzer, because he puts words to this idea a little bit
Mm,
better. But people like consumers purchase not just based on the emotional state that they want to achieve, which they do, but it's also about what that product represents about me in the world. And so when you think about clothing,
mm.
which is a very front and center brand for the communities that I live in, I'm going to make a decision, like mostly unconsciously, about what does this say about me in my communities and in my world. And so I think this is like a big miss. So it's like if you're just trying to sell shirts, like, yeah, it's a really competitive and scary place. But if you think about that secondary layer of like consumer behavior, what I buy is going to represent something about me to the world. So what is it that I want to show off? And unconsciously, we're always making those decisions throughout our buying journey. And I think if more brands just focused on that unique element of like the consumer buying decision, they will find edges to succeed, and what are also called like wedges to sort of like win and grow from. Um, yeah.
So I love this. I want to keep us moving forward because I still have a lot more I wanted to ask you, and I know we only have a 30-minute more window. You guys have built Basics to go on to be a well over 9-figure per year company in annual revenue. Super, super impressive. Can we go back to, or maybe continue to drive home like the origin story of this? I think you told me in the past in person that you guys went to a show and you guys were able to like talk with manufacturers of textile manufacturers and things like this to really understand how you can make the thing that you wanted to make. Can you maybe elaborate on that story a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. We were constrained. We didn't have a whole lot of cash to like build a big brand overnight. And so what we ended up doing was starting with blanks. Like we found a blank supplier in Los Angeles that had like low cost blanks for us, similar
When you
to
what are
print
blanks?
on
Just for
demand.
anybody,
So,
like what is
okay,
blank?
so a blank is like a T-shirt that has no labels, and you can buy it in bulk pretty affordably. It'd be like a few dollars, and then you can go take it and screen print it. And print-on-demand companies just do all that for you, right? And
Yeah.
so, similar to the way that like I think today we probably would have done print on demand just to get launched and prove. And so that's what we did with Built. We ordered, a very low count of shirts. We did the photo shoots. We put the brand up, and it ended up working. And so,
So you guys
literally, got the
legit took
company off
like
the ground with
normal blank.
blanks.
Wow. Okay. So you didn't even have this
Yeah.
premium product that was 3 to 5 times better necessarily yet. That was
No, not
mostly
at all.
interesting.
And
So you
and
did the
that's the
messaging
crazy
though.
thing. Yeah, like we were definitely like advertising it. And like, there's probably a period where like we were probably, pumping up the quality of these things a little bit too much. But that brand, that piece of the brand kind of came after we had switched suppliers eventually. But if you think about the origin story, like we
Mm.
had really started with like what is the quickest way for us to just get inventory to sell? And we knew that like in digital funnels, the thing that's going to separate us is our marketing material and our messaging. So like let's invest our time there, and let's just get blanks that we like to wear, and they're just like a good enough. Like sometimes good enough is good to go. And
Yeah.
so we brought that to the market, and we just wanted to learn about the funnel. What was the cost of what was the cost per purchase, like driving ads. And so that's what we were honing in on. And we found a recipe that worked really well with all these things about the branding that I've already said. And that's when, we had gotten to like 20, $30,000 a month at like just doing that. And then we
Wow.
started to think, okay, like now let's level up our product. We've kind of already proven out that we can generate demand. So we ended up going to this thing that I recommend every clothing entrepreneur should go do, which is every year in Las Vegas, there's something called sourcing. And a lot of big brands will rent big booths to try to talk to like, Nordstrom's or, whatever big box retailer might be there or small. And there's this lesser known part of magic called magic sourcing. And I had heard of it because another clothing founder told me about it. So we ended up going, and it's like every supplier from all around the world comes to one room and you can go meet suppliers. And so what we ended up doing was finding the closest product in the market that like was close to the quality look and feel that we wanted. We bought it online, and then we literally took those samples to sourcing and just walked around until we
Mhm.
found the supplier who actually made the piece that we
So
brought.
you guys bought a competitor product, basically.
Yes.
Essentially, it's a
Yeah.
competitive product. I love this. This is so relevant for anybody listening too. You buy
Oh,
your
for sure.
competitor, and then you go and try to figure out, hey, who can make something like this, but maybe make it like a little bit better, make it this way that I want. The point is, you had the guts to go and buy the product, and then go and shop it around.
Yeah, and we were looking for who actually created the product, because like
Mm,
we knew that like most of the suppliers in the room were creating the highest quality stuff. And so like with those samples, we were literally walking around from booth to booth, be like, "Hey, did you make this?" And we actually found the supplier that had made the garment that we brought, and we were like,
so
"Okay,
scrappy.
perfect. Like, yeah, like here's how we want you to change it." And in the clothing world, when you start to move into like manufacturing your own product at volume, everyone's like, okay, send me your tech pack. And so, I was like, what's a tech pack? And that's like where they lay out the exact sizing and as well as like the dimensions of the cut for the garment silhouette.
Okay.
And tech packs are like expensive to make. Like we were bootstrapped as bootstrapped could be. So they were like, 3 to, I think someone wanted to charge me like 5 grand for a tech pack, which is not much. But a little, like just to just demonstrate how scrappy we were, we just put that weight on the supplier and said, hey, you already have the garment. So we want you to change it by an inch here, an inch there, change the color, change the hem. Super simple stuff. And no, we're not going to send you a tech pack. Like you send us the tech pack. And they were like, okay, cool. We'll do that. And so, and oftentimes like in an industry, there's like the way it's done. And in clothing, it's like, oh, well, you get a supplier and then you send us the tech pack and then you place the order. And it's like there's in every industry that exists, right? This is the way it's done. And a lot of
Mhm.
times you can shortcut a lot of that cost and time by just putting the weight like onto the supplier or just thinking differently about how that industry can work for you.
Mm. So scrappy, and I love hearing this story, and it makes me think too about anybody listening to this, like building, let's just call it apparel, just shirts, right? Uh, they can now you guys had to go and source out your supplier first, right? And you had to buy blanks first, so you had to come up with capital.
Yeah.
In today's world, you wouldn't have, like you mentioned, you wouldn't have done it this way anymore. You probably would have just started with print on demand, literally just started there, validated that you can generate demand, and then you would have went to this conference still, and then you would have went and
Mhm.
actually found that product that you really, really wanted to bring, and then you'd go and still continue that journey probably. But you basically would have saved a bunch of inventory cash up front and probably a lot of shipping and fulfillment hassles as well.
Yeah, and like I think this is the hack of all hacks. It's actually something I've done at every single brand I've started, which is like what is the lowest
11:39.
cost, fastest way that we can just reach the market. And the product like for the first few weeks or first few months like doesn't have to be perfect. And like I think that people get hung up there. Like at Balls of Steel, our original product was ball bearings, like actual metal ball bearings, and we just like wanted to validate it and see if people would sell it. And we switched that product supply chain really fast, and we switched built supply chain really fast. And so with physical goods in particular, not so much for software, but for physical goods, find little ways to just validate the market before you start investing in product. And so print on demand is one of the top ways to just build something and get it out there and test your brand and test your skill sets and learn about digital funnels. Like, yeah, I'm a huge fan of those shortcuts. And then there's a time where like where we had gotten to like 30,000 a month, and then there were some customers coming in complaining about the quality of those blanks, and that those insights are actually what led us to instruct the supplier of what to actually change. And I don't
Mm,
think we would have had some of those like breakthrough insights without the experience of just getting off the ground with something versus like having the best thing.
completely agree. I want to just do a quick time check here because I want to get to what you're working on now and also transition to the mental health, the mental fitness, the the struggles mentally of building a business, and you've built multiple at this point. And me and you talk a lot about the mental health side of things on a personal level. And I think it's not something that's talked about often enough, especially amongst entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, because we're all supposed to be super like, you know, chest up high, supposed to
Yeah.
be super confident all the time, 100% of the time. And while we all want
Yeah.
that to be true, and the reality is every single person has breakdowns, every single person goes through hardships in their life and heartbreaks and trauma. And I want to kind of dive in there if we can kind of transition and
Yeah.
talk about what you're building now with Yuna. What is Yuna? And let's talk about that.
I would love to, man. So, so with Built, I ended up selling the company, and honestly, like the track record of career was just kind of up and to the right. And then, I found out that the girl that I had married, who was like my high school sweetheart, was cheating, and it caused a divorce. And so, like that, honestly, like took me from the highest low or highest high to like lowest low, and
Mhm.
it just sank me, man. And so, like, I'm very outspoken about mental health today because through that really difficult period, I ended up throwing myself into therapy of all types, different modalities, different experts. I tried group therapy and individual therapy, and honestly transformed as a human being in like the most positive way.
Mm,
And that for me took a lot of time. And we also live in a world today where like traditional mental health care is incredibly expensive. It's hundreds of dollars an hour to see someone really good. And if it's insurance that's helping you afford it, it usually takes 5 to 6 weeks of waiting to actually talk to someone. When a lot of times people need help at like 2 a.m., it's like in the moment of need. And
mm,
so, thinking about like where humanity is going, we sat down and I started thinking about like what would the future of mental health care look like if it was completely democratized in the sense of we gave everyone universal access and made it 1% of the cost. And how could we do that? And how would it change the world? And the reality is that through machine learning models today and building an agentic AI therapeutic, we can actually change how the individual heals on like a one-to-one in a one-to-one way. And then collectively, when we do that at scale, we can also fundamentally change a generation by the way that people process these emotional events in their life. And being a founder is such a good ground for needing sort of to talk things out, right? Because in addition to all the normal weight of life, well, quote unquote normal, no, like everyone's unique. There's no such thing as normal. But when you add on entrepreneurship, you're also adding on a lot of uncertainty and you're adding on a lot of doubt sometimes. And navigating that as a founder is part of how you create staying power. And so I'm a huge advocate of mental health. And now today we're building a company called Yuna. My team is ex Headspace as well as ex Noom, and just incredible builders, and we have some PhDs in psychology on the team as well. And we're building, both on the LLM AI side, models that can reason and think like a therapist on your behalf, so that you can have a place to go and talk about your mental health for 1% of the cost, right from an empathetic voice on your phone that's available 24/7. And then the thing that we're also working on
mm,
is passive mental health tracking. So you can kind of download the app, turn it on, and forget about it, and it will actually come to you at the right time. And so Yuna, Yuna, io is like right now where people can go to find this. But this is the future of mental health. It's now
I
from your
believe it.
phone versus seeing a clinician in the office, which has additional
You're,
benefits.
yeah, you're taking mental health online, right?
Yes.
And not only online, but also like self therapy, essentially using AI instead of necessarily having to pay the hundreds of dollars per hour for a therapist. Not saying that it needs to completely erase that human capability. It's not that. It could be a supplementation of the human touch as well. But the point is, it's on demand and it's there, uh, when you need it the most, which is the darkest hours usually. It's not like conveniently Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Right? It's uh, it's when you're building a business, you have it comes at a time where maybe your key employee quit, or maybe your supplier, like maybe your product line just went completely out of inventory, and you have 100 orders on the line, and you're like, "What do I do? I think I'm going to have an anxiety attack." Right?
Yes.
And or it's I'm trying to balance my family life while I'm also trying to build this online business that I have this dream, but I'm having a difficult time of navigating my marriage and also the business at the same time, right? Like or my kids, or it's all this crazy stuff that we as business owners, builders go through that helps with. So I applaud that, man.
Yeah, man, it's been really exciting, and like, we think that like to be the sort of like the bright light in the space, we really focus on trust and safety as well. So like not only, really good content, like really good therapy, in other words, but also like the safest environment. So like we're building with HIPAA and SOC 2 compliancy in mind. And we want to create a safe environment for people so they can talk and know that they're data is completely safe and private for everything that you talk about. And, we think that that's really important. And so, yeah, like when you're a founder, like you said it so right, like there's all these elements that might be gumming up sort of, we'll call it the mental and emotional body, where you're thinking about the weight of the business and maybe you're trying something, but it's not working and you feel like giving up. And really all it is a voice of doubt. And having a therapeutic session can really not only help sort things out in a quality way, but help alleviate some of that emotional burden so that you can get back to building in a fun, positive way and feel good about it. And that's just like, through all the things, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, like in the building of EverBee, where there's a time when you start and maybe you hit that trough of sorrow, and like the way that you balance your mental health will ultimately either create resiliency or not. And so, when it comes to the therapeutic journey and entrepreneurship, it's not just something you do when things are hard, but also it's something you do when things are good. Like, for example, when it's hard, you might want to talk about, to build resiliency, for example, like anything you're going through. But also when it's good, like let's say sales are really high, staying in a therapeutic process can help you avoid certain like pitfalls that can then happen. Like let's say the bank
Mhm.
account's flush with cash and now we want to dump it all into like one thing, for example, or like in the euphoria, maybe things happen. And so the therapeutic journey is more so about like, in my opinion, it's more so about like steady life ascension. And it's about
Mhm.
understanding your own decision process. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's this concept of your thoughts, your emotions, and how they really interact together, right? And so what we want to do is help people unify that whole experience through the therapeutic process. And so, yeah, we're on a mission with Yuna and it's going really well. We've helped tens of thousands of people navigate their business life, navigate their home life. People, sometimes they go through breakups, they download Yuna. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I'm stressed out at work. And so they download Yuna, and 5-star reviews, man. We're really helping people at scale, and we're just getting started. We just served our 30,000th session, and our company's and our team's mission here and goal is to have served 1 billion digital therapeutic sessions. And one of our company's like core values is you have to believe to achieve. And so, when we started it, we had 0 sessions, and now
Mhm.
we've served 30,000 sessions, and we will hit 1 billion. It's just
I
going to take
know.
us a little bit of time.
Oh, no question, man. I think I could probably claim, lots of those sessions personally. I'm a customer of Unit 2,
Let's
if anybody
go.
was wondering, and also Everbee. You know, we signed up the entire company for Yuna, as Grant, you well know, but anybody listening to this. So now we've got like our team entirely using Yuna as their self therapy platform. So I was excited personally to do that at some point, to really embrace mental health, mental fitness, therapy from a core value, from a company value standpoint, because I know that like if I'm healthy mentally, I'm more clear, I'm a better dad, I'm a better husband, I'm a better founder, I'm a better business builder, I'm just a better human being, I believe. And so I want to thank you for that too, man. I'm a heavy Una user. I'm not saying that because we're friends. I'm saying that because I use
Yeah.
it.
Dude, it's so cool to hear. I am too, man. Like I use the product a ton actually. And it's so cool because like as a leader, it's difficult to transfer to a team that which you don't have already, right? And so like as a leader, one of the things that is important is to give direction and confidence and excitement, enthusiasm to the team. And like those things can get really disrupted with the very normal course of life, which creates emotional noise. And if not settled down appropriately, like can really cause issues as a leader. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I think therapy is like one of the biggest unlocks to level up in life. And it's just today it's too expensive. And so we've made it 1% of the cost and we're doing our thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the mission personally, and especially, I mean, I know that's not only focused towards entrepreneurs and business builders, but specifically for folks listening to this. I mean, these guys, these men and women are like parents, up and comers. Some of them are students, and they're straight up have big dreams, and they want location freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, and you need to be in a clear mental space in order to really achieve those difficult tasks. And anyway, so whether they're going to Una or they're literally paying for a therapist, in their local market, either way is great. I mean, therapy is just important just in general.
Yes, and we made something special. So, if anyone listening does want to have a conversation, about their mental health, about the things they're going through, and the traditional therapeutic experiences are too expensive, or you want to chat in between therapeutic sessions, you can go to Yuna. It's YUNA. So Yuna.io/EverBee. And everyone who goes to that link, basically in the next week, will get 50% off a year subscription. And so we just wanted to create that for anyone listening. We just think that entrepreneurship and therapy go hand in hand to create success.
Thank you for that, man. That's really awesome. I have a couple rapid fire questions for you if you want to kind of finish off the show. Are
Yes.
you ready?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it.
Cool. All right, rapid fire. Here we go. So, what's your favorite business book?
Oh, man. Anything written by Richard Branson. I think he has a
Hmm,
book called Screw It, Let's Do It, which is just like every entrepreneur should read. It just kind of takes the seriousness out of the room of just like, just go do stuff. So, yeah, that one.
I love that. What's one thing that you wish that you knew before starting your business?
That really big, great things start by individuals like you. It's really kind of something that's hard to, when I was young, was hard to wrap my head around because you look at these big outcomes and you look at these incredible things and you're like, how do those get started? And the reality is they get started in an idea in one person's head, and someone listening right now like has the next idea for what's going to be huge, and it's belief that will sort of like be the wind in your sails to get there.
I love that. What's the worst business advice that you've ever received?
Wow, what a great question. I think the worst at business advice, it's not like a specific thing, but oftentimes it's advice that comes from the legacy industry. So oftentimes as industries evolve and grow, like the new thing is probably where you want to navigate to. And in the commerce world, at least, a few years ago, um, when Meta was first coming out, we would hear a lot of advice like, oh, you should go do TV ads. And like that was bad advice at the time. And so I tend to discount advice that comes from, the legacy, like how the industry used to work, and I
Mm,
prioritize advice on like where it's going.
love it. How many hours do you currently work on your business per week?
I mean, per week, I don't know, 12 hours a day times 7 pretty much. I take Saturdays off, and I take about half Sunday off, but I mean, I'm usually on my laptop at 8:30 and I'm usually closing it at, 10 PM.
Y-
Maybe a quick lunch, but we're really grinding right now.
Yeah, yeah. You guys are kind of in startup phase, right? And sometimes that's what it takes. And I think you told me that in the past. I think at the time, probably about a year ago, we were just talking, chatting, and my physical efforts, right, like staying in shape and stuff like that, I was kind of voicing to you, like, man, I feel like I haven't really prioritized my physical fitness. And I think you mentioned something, I think still sticks with me, and you were just like, sometimes you have to kind of be super focused on the business, and then sometimes it's super focused on your family even more, and then sometimes it's super focused on your fitness, or I'm sorry, business. Um, the point is, like, it's not always balanced all the time. It's kind of like goes through waves.
100%. I think that, like, for especially starting a business, there's like, I at least give myself about 8 months to do nothing but build the business. And in Yuna's case in particular, I gave myself 2 years. So it's like no balance. I don't really care about balance right now, just work. I'll find balance later. But I think it's like at least a period of just absolute dedication and commitment is really a bit of a secret sauce.
Yeah, I agree with that. And building EverBee too in the past 3 years, if there hasn't been much balance. The only thing that I probably prioritize, and I don't really consider balance, I consider like my priorities. Like it's like my family, and then it's like EverBee. But like if you look at my hobby life, it's like zero hobbies. Um, I stopped playing guitar. I stopped learning how to play guitar. I stopped like studying another language. I stopped everything except for I only think about my family and the business.
Mm.
And that's how you build something that's really hard to build. And I believe that has, and also all my other businesses, I had to shut them down. I totally stopped them, stopped all of the investments that I made, and that's just what you have to do, I think, to do hard things.
Yeah, and like, dude, I'm actually like, out of anyone in my, world that I really respect and look up to in terms of focus, it's you, Cody. Like what you've done with Everbee is absolutely incredible. And I remember we were having a conversation and after I had sold Built and I was doing some venture stuff and thinking about what's the next movement I want to create in the world. And you were like, dude, like you were just hammering in on me like focus, like choose one thing and like go be that billion-dollar founder in one thing, versus trying to make 3 or 4 happen all at the same time. And so like you truly changed my life through that conversation. That was pre-Una actually when we were having that
Remember that
conversation. And you were
conversation?
just you were such an encouraging light, number one, but also like you were super like kind of hard on me about focus, and I so appreciate you for that. And yeah, now I'm a huge man. I focus is absolutely everything, but that's something like I had a breakthrough by just knowing you, man. I appreciate you and your impact on the world too.
Thank you for that, man. It really means a lot to me. And I could say the same thing, a bunch of things, same right back to you. I do have one last question. If your family and your friends and your customers all had to get together, okay, without you, and they had to write an honest article, a deep, long article about you, characterizing like your traits, like maybe telling stories. What do you think generally? What are the few core pillar things that they would say?
Oh, well, shoot. I know that they would say, that Grant is a highly optimistic, kind of positive light in the room that he's in. I've heard that a few times. They'd probably say that, like, I was someone, who's ambitious and like kind of never going to give up on something. Just probably, I think optimism and not giving up are two in the same. And then, the third, I would love to throw in like a downside in there too. We don't know what we don't know. So I always try to solicit feedback from, others on, what are those areas of my character that I could work on and things like that. And so, one of the things that I've been working on is just to be as generous as I can be with all things. And so that's an area that like I think kind of comes and goes for me. Like sometimes it's financially generous and sometimes it's generous with my time and just generosity in general. But like, I'm trying to think of like two positives and a negative here. But I think the negative is just like, I think we all have a bias to be self-oriented, right? Like being somewhat selfish is like super easy.
Yeah.
And it's something I always am fighting against and looking to be more generous with my time, looking to be more generous with my income. And I just want to be thoughtful and just about others. And I just want to give. And that's like kind of a muscle that I'm always trying to work on and grow. But yeah, those would be two positives and a negative.
That's awesome, bro. Grant, I wrapped it up, man. Thank you for coming on, sharing your story. Thanks for sharing so many golden nuggets that I think our listeners got a lot of value out of. Especially, I personally have. So appreciate your friendship. Love you, man. Thank you very much for coming on.
Love you too, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome.
See
See
ya.
you soon.